Welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're going to be talking about the Minnesota Vikings and how they have a chance to actually win the NFC North this season and what their team is really looking like going into the 2022 NFL season. But before we hop into the content of today's video, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and drop a like on the video if you guys did enjoy it. I want to wish everybody a happy Memorial Day. I hope everybody's having a great weekend. But with all that being said, let's hop into the video about the Minnesota Vikings and their chances in the 2022 NFL season. Now, last season, the Vikings finished 8-9, second in their division behind the Green Bay Packers. But that 8-9 record the Vikings had, I don't think properly represents how good this team was a season ago. They had a lot of very close losses. To open up the season, they lost to the Cincinnati Bengals on a game-winning field goal when the Vikings should have hit their OT field goal to win the game. They come back and lose a thriller to the Cardinals week 2. They lose by 1 point when the Cardinals were red hot when they started off the season, undefeated through the first 8 weeks of the year. And then even later on in the season, they lost another overtime game to the Baltimore Ravens when they had a pretty substantial lead in the fourth quarter. The Ravens came all the way back to win that game in overtime. And then December 5th against Detroit, Jared Goff had a walk-off touchdown to beat the Vikings, and that was another thriller game that the Vikings really should have won. And with a little bit of luck and the ball rolling the other way, the Vikings would have had a very good season last year, made the playoffs if, one or two of these games would have been different. The Vikings were in the thick of the playoff race until the very end, but just barely missed the playoffs, mainly because of these close overtime losses that they had throughout the NFL season. Really, the main issue with the Vikings last season was their defense. Their offense was one of the most dynamic in the league. When you have Justin Jefferson, who put up 1,600 yards last year with 10 touchdowns, and is already a top 5 wide receiver in the league, with Adam Thielen on the other side and Dalvin Cook in the backfield, you have one of the best skill position groups in the NFL. And I know Kirk Cousins gets a lot of slander, but he's had 2 really good seasons back-to-back years, really career seasons. In 2020, he had a 67 completion percentage for 4,200 yards, 35 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. And then this last year, when many people thought he was going to take a dip in production once again, he put up a 66 completion percentage, 4,200 yards, 33 touchdowns, to only 7 interceptions, which really, if you look at touchdown-interception ratio, is his best season of his career. Now, with all the weapons that he has on his offense, he should be putting up pretty good numbers like that. When you have 2 premier wide receivers, Irv Smith, who they took a high pick on at tight end, and then Dalvin Cook, who's one of the most electrifying backs in the NFL, you should be pretty efficient, and Kirk Cousins has taken advantage of that opportunity. The Vikings offensive line was a little bit inconsistent here or there, but they had some young players that they drafted like Christian Darrisaw, and it really came along as they got further into the season. But the defense tended to be a problem last year for the Vikings, and they really went out and tried to address these issues this offseason, and that's a big reason why I think they have a chance to push the Packers for the division this season. The Vikings had the 24th worst defense in the league as far as points go. They give up 25.1 points per game, and that's a very hard number to overcome if you're an offense having to really win shootouts every single week. Eventually, you're not going to be able to keep up with some offenses, and that's kind of what happened to the Vikings towards the end of the season. The Vikings pass rush was really solid last year. They had 51 sacks, which was second in the league, but the young secondary ended up causing a lot of problems for them, and they really made sure to address that in the draft, and also shore up their linebacking unit, which also caused some problems in the run game. The Vikings really made an emphasis on fixing the back end of their defense. Their biggest move this free agency was signing edge rusher Zadarius Smith, the ex-Packer, on a 3-year contract with a value of $42 million. He should improve their pass rush even more and also help them in the run a little bit. I think he's going to be a very solid addition next to Eric Kendricks. And they also brought in Jordan Hicks on a 2-year, $12 million deal. So you can see that the Vikings really went out and wanted to address their linebacking unit, and they brought in 2 new starters, which should really help out on the run defense part of their defense. Now, in the NFL draft, they really went out and addressed the issues in their secondary. The Vikings' 2020 third-round pick, Cameron Dantzler, was a pretty solid player towards the end of the season, but the Vikings really needed a lot more depth in that area, especially at the safety spot. So with their first pick in the 2022 NFL draft, they went with Lewis Sine, who will pair nicely with Harrison Smith. I think that should definitely help them prevent giving up a lot of big plays, which was kind of the kryptonite of the Vikings defense last year. I think having Sine back there and hopefully Harrison Smith stays healthy, they should definitely be able to prevent some plays over the top, which hurt them drastically last season. And then in the second round, they brought in Andrew Booth, who will definitely bring more depth to them in the secondary. Some people thought Booth could have snuck into the first round, but he ended up dropping to the 42nd pick, and the Vikings took a flyer on him. I'll be interested to see if he plays slot cornerback early on in the year for the Vikings, or if they kind of develop him this year and he takes over for Patrick Peterson and plays kind of, the cornerback 4. If one of those starting boundary cornerbacks go down, then he gets implemented into the game. I'll be interested to see their plan with Booth. But even then, they have some more added depth there, and Booth can step in right away and be a solid corner in case they ever need him. And with the Vikings' last pick, they took Ed Ingram, an offensive guard from LSU, and I mentioned earlier in the video, their offensive line is really their weak spot of their offense. It was still a fairly solid unit. Pro Football Focus rated them as the 23rd best line in the league last year, but that's with a lot of young players, and then replaced their worst player on the line last year, Oli Udoh, and they brought in Ed Ingram and Jesse Davis to kind of battle out for that right guard spot, and they should definitely bring some more solid play than what they got last season at the right guard spot. Now, really the last main thing that's being overlooked is their new head coach, Kevin O'Connell. He was the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams, and he's been learning under Sean McVay for some time now. O'Connell seems to be a very good reliever for this Vikings team that's kind of dealt with a hard coach the last few years. Mike Zimmer was kind of known as not really a player's coach, and he didn't really know how to utilize the offense the best. And when the defense kind of slipped up the last couple years and hasn't been, as good as it was back in the Vikings' heyday, it was time to move on, and that's exactly what they did. And they went out and got an offensive young mind who can really get the most out of this offense and kind of be a player's coach and bring more excitement to the building. When asked about O'Connell, Thielen said, "When I talk about a breath of fresh air and kind of rejuvenation, it's because when you get out here, it's like stuff makes sense and it's exciting." So it seems like O'Connell is getting some good reps so far from the Vikings early on in the offseason program, and I can't wait to see how he utilizes all the weapons the Vikings have on offense, and if Kirk Cousins can take another step under his coaching. The last piece of the puzzle, as far as this NFC North division goes, the Packers got substantially weak this offseason. Now, I think this is pretty much a two-team race. I don't think the Bears or the Lions are ready to compete for this division yet. The Lions still have Jared Goff at quarterback, and they're still in the rebuilding process. I don't expect them to compete this year. I think they have some young talent on that roster, but they're not ready to compete with the Vikings or the Packers quite yet. And when you look at the Bears, it's a pretty similar situation. They have a few good players on that roster, but it's still very flawed. They have a young quarterback in Justin Fields, and we don't know how he's going to develop quite yet. So I really see this division as a two-team race between the Packers and the Vikings. And the Vikings got better this offseason, and the Packers got worse, and that gap closed. In the last two seasons, the Vikings and Packers have split games, so I definitely think that the Vikings know how to compete with the Packers, and they've been right there with them every single season as far as their head-to-head matchups go. The Packers lost one of their best players on defense in Zadarius Smith, who went to the Vikings, and then they also lost their best playmaker. They got rid of Davante Adams, they traded him to the Las Vegas Raiders, and they also lost Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So that's two of their top weapons from last season. Packers tried to go out and address the receiver room with getting players like Sammy Watkins and drafting Christian Watson, but I don't think that receiving room is going to be very effective this upcoming season. They have a lot of young players on there, including Amari Rodgers, and I think those players may need some time to develop to get to the point of where the Packers were with their two veterans last year in Scantling and Davante Adams. But Vegas has the Vikings win total at 9, and their odds to make the playoffs are fairly close. But I would definitely take the Vikings to at least make one of the wild cards. I think the NFC is pretty open this year, but I do think that they have a real chance to win the NFC North. And it's going to come down to the young players on the defense and if they can take a next step and not be towards the bottom of the league like they were last season. If their defense can get humming, I think the Vikings have a great chance to win the NFC North in 2022. But thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and drop a like on the video if you guys did enjoy it. Let me know what you guys think of the Vikings and if they have a real shot to win the NFC North. And if not, let me know your reason why and who you think will win the division this upcoming year. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.